Most people don't question religion because they want to rebel. They question it because they notice something unsettling. Some deeply religious people do terrible things, while some non-believers are genuinely kind. So if morality doesn't automatically come from religion, where does it come from? The fear nobody admits out loud. Most people are not afraid of hell first. They are afraid of themselves. That is the part almost nobody says out loud. Because when someone begins questioning religion, it can feel like questioning the entire structure holding their life together. If faith gave you your ideas about right and wrong, then doubt suddenly feels dangerous. Not intellectually dangerous, personally dangerous. You start wondering whether morality still means anything without God behind it. And once that question enters your mind, it spreads into everything else. If there is no divine punishment, why would people behave? If morality is just human opinion, then what stops society from turning into chaos? Makes sense, right? Those fears are not irrational. Religious systems were built to answer exactly those questions. For most of history, religion was not just spiritual guidance. It was social structure. It created order before modern legal systems even existed. In many societies, sins and crimes were almost the same thing. Stealing was not only illegal, it offended God. Lying was not just dishonest, it threatened the moral fabric of the community. That system worked surprisingly well for a long time. Fear is a powerful motivator. Governments eventually discovered that too, although they usually skipped the stained glass windows and went straight to paperwork. Religion helped large groups of humans cooperate. It gave people shared values, shared rituals, and a shared sense of accountability. In a world filled with uncertainty, that stability mattered. But hidden inside that structure is a question that becomes difficult to ignore once you notice it. If a person only behaves morally because they believe they are constantly being watched, is that actually goodness? Or is it obedience under surveillance? That question changes the entire conversation, because suddenly morality stops being about empathy or character, and starts becoming about compliance, about following rules to avoid punishment. And history becomes deeply uncomfortable once you realize how many terrible things humans have justified, simply because authority told them it was righteous. Obedience is not the same as morality. One of the most uncomfortable truths about morality is that humans often confuse goodness with obedience. Those two things sound similar at first, but they are not the same at all. A genuinely moral person asks questions like, is this compassionate? Is this fair? Does this reduce suffering? An obedient person asks something much simpler. Am I allowed to do this? That difference matters more than people realize. Because once obedience becomes more important than empathy, ordinary people can end up defending things they would normally recognize as cruel. History is filled with examples of this. Wars were justified through religion. Executions were presented as righteous. Slavery, persecution, and violence were often defended by people who believed they were serving a higher moral cause. Not because religious people were uniquely evil. Humans in general are deeply vulnerable to authority. Religion simply became one of the strongest forms of authority ever created. Psychologists saw this clearly during the Milgram experiments in the 1960s. Ordinary participants were instructed by researchers to deliver what they believed were painful electric shocks to strangers. Most obeyed the instructions, even when the other person appeared to be suffering. That experiment shocked the world because it revealed something disturbing. Most people are not naturally sadistic. They simply tend to trust authority figures more than their own moral instincts. Now take that same psychological weakness and combine it with divine authority. Suddenly the commands are not coming from a scientist or a government, they are believed to come from God himself. That changes everything. Once someone becomes convinced that God personally approves of their actions, almost anything can start feeling morally justified. And the strange part is that this mechanism does not only exist inside religion. Political ideologies use it, cults use it, nationalism uses it too. Humans constantly hand over moral responsibility to systems larger than themselves, because certainty feels safer than doubt. But here is the problem nobody can fully escape. If morality only exists because authority commands it, then would cruelty become good the moment authority approved it? Most people instinctively say no. And that answer reveals something important. Deep down, humans already possess moral instincts independent of authority. Otherwise, we would never question authority in the first place. Morality existed before religion did. This is the part that surprises a lot of people. Human morality is far older than organized religion. Much older. Anthropologists have found evidence of compassion and cooperation in prehistoric human communities that existed thousands of years before major religious systems appeared. Some ancient skeletons show severe injuries that healed over long periods of time, broken legs, missing limbs, serious disabilities. That matters because those individuals could not have survived alone. Someone carried them, fed them, protected them from predators and starvation. Entire groups invested time and resources into keeping vulnerable people alive long before written scripture existed. Think about how strange that really is. No churches, no commandments carved into stone, no priests threatening eternal punishment. Just humans helping humans because survival depended on cooperation. Empathy was not suddenly invented by religion. It was already part of human social evolution. And it is not only humans either. Scientists have observed elephants comforting distressed members of their herd. Dolphins protect injured companions from drowning. Chimpanzees show signs of fairness and reconciliation after conflict. One famous experiment even found monkeys refusing rewards when they saw another monkey being treated unfairly. Honestly, that sounds less like advanced philosophy, and more like two retirees arguing over who got the larger slice of pie at a family dinner. But the point remains the same. Moral behavior appears deeply connected to social survival. Groups that cooperated survived better than groups that constantly turned on each other. Over time, empathy, guilt, fairness, and social bonding became wired into human behavior because those traits improved the chances of survival. Religion did not create those instincts. It organized them. It turned them into stories, rituals, laws, and identities that larger civilizations could follow. And modern neuroscience supports this idea. Researchers studying the brain discovered that humans often experience emotional distress when witnessing suffering in others. Our brains are built for social connection and emotional response. Of course, humans are not naturally perfect. We are also tribal, selfish, competitive, and capable of cruelty. Anyone who has spent more than 10 minutes in a grocery store parking lot already understands that. But morality appears to emerge from human nature itself, far more than most people were taught. And once that realization settles in, one major assumption starts collapsing very quickly. The problem with divine morality. There is a philosophical problem buried inside religion that people have argued about for thousands of years. And honestly, it still makes believers and atheists uncomfortable alike. The question sounds simple at first. Is something good because God commands it? Or does God command it because it is already good? That may sound like one of those debates professors have while drinking expensive coffee and avoiding sunlight, but the question creates a very real problem once you think it through. If something becomes moral only because God says so, then morality becomes completely dependent on authority. In that case, anything could theoretically become good if it were commanded, even cruelty. Most people instinctively reject that idea immediately. They do not suddenly believe torture or oppression would become moral just because an authority figure approved it. And that reaction reveals something important. It means most people already believe goodness exists independently from authority, at least to some degree. Otherwise, they would have no basis to question authority at all. This problem has existed since ancient Greece. Even Plato wrestled with it more than 2,000 years ago, long before modern debates about atheism or secular morality existed. And despite centuries of theology, no religion has ever fully escaped the dilemma. Instead, many believers unconsciously merge two separate ideas together. Goodness and divine authority become treated as though they are automatically identical. But history complicates that assumption very quickly. Take slavery as an example. Most modern religious believers reject slavery as morally wrong. Yet many ancient religious texts regulated slavery, rather than clearly condemning it outright. Now here is where things get interesting. When modern believers reject slavery, they usually do not reach that conclusion purely from Scripture itself. They reach it through empathy, moral reasoning, and modern ethical understanding. Then they reinterpret the Scripture afterward through that moral lens. In other words, human moral intuition becomes the final filter. And this pattern appears repeatedly throughout history. Societies often evolve morally before religious interpretations evolve with them. Views on slavery, women's rights, punishment, and human dignity frequently changed culturally first. Religious reform usually followed later. Not always, but often enough to notice the pattern. And once you notice that pattern, a very uncomfortable possibility appears. Maybe religion does not create morality, as much as morality slowly reshapes religion over time. That idea unsettles people because it flips the entire structure upside down. Why good atheists terrify certain belief systems. There is one kind of person certain belief systems quietly struggle to explain: a genuinely good atheist. Not the exaggerated stereotype people sometimes imagine. Not the angry internet caricature yelling at strangers in comment sections at 2 in the morning. Just an ordinary person who is honest, compassionate, generous, and decent, without believing in divine punishment or heavenly reward. That kind of person creates a psychological problem, because their existence challenges one of the oldest assumptions many people were taught from childhood: the idea that morality depends entirely on religion. If someone can live ethically without belief in God, then morality may come from something deeper than doctrine alone. And for some believers, that possibility feels deeply unsettling because it weakens the connection between faith and moral authority. Many people were raised with a very simple equation: no God means no morality, no religion means chaos, but reality refuses to cooperate with that formula. Some of the least religious countries in the modern world consistently rank among the safest and most socially cooperative societies on earth. Countries like Sweden, Denmark, and Norway often show low violent crime rates, high levels of social trust, and strong support for education and healthcare. Now, that does not prove religion is harmful. Human societies are far too complicated for simplistic conclusions like that. But it does challenge the claim that civilization immediately collapses once religious belief declines. Humans appear capable of building moral systems through empathy, stability, education, law, and shared social responsibility too. And honestly, older generations sometimes understand this in a surprisingly practical way. Many grandparents never studied philosophy, yet they lived by simple moral principles that worked remarkably well. Do not lie, help your neighbors, return favors, keep your word. And perhaps the most important commandment of modern civilization: do not become the reason your children need therapy later. Not exactly advanced theology, still effective. The deeper point is this: goodness becomes far more meaningful when it is chosen freely, rather than performed out of fear. If someone helps another person while expecting no cosmic reward, that action becomes deeply human instead of transactional. Because morality based purely on surveillance is still self-interest in disguise. But kindness chosen voluntarily reveals something much more profound about human nature. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Religion still serves a powerful purpose. This is the point where many conversations about religion suddenly become shallow. Criticizing religion is easy. Understanding why billions of people continue to need it is much harder. Religion did not survive for thousands of years because humans were foolish. It survived because it fulfills some very real psychological and emotional needs that modern society still struggles to replace. Religion gives people community. It gives rituals during chaos. It gives structure during grief. Most importantly, it gives meaning to suffering. And humans desperately want suffering to mean something. When people lose someone they love, religion offers a story larger than death. It tells grieving parents their child still exists somewhere beyond this world. It tells lonely people they are seen and valued. It tells frightened people that death is not simply darkness and silence forever. Those are emotionally powerful promises. Even people who leave religion intellectually often continue missing it emotionally afterward. They miss the rituals, the certainty, the feeling that life followed some larger script instead of random confusion stitched together by stress, taxes, and lower back pain. Humans are storytelling creatures. We naturally search for meaning in the same way we search for connection and safety. Religion became one of humanity's oldest systems for organizing those needs into something emotionally survivable. And honestly, secular society has not always done a great job replacing what religion once provided. We removed many traditional communities, then replaced them with social media feeds and endless digital distraction. Not exactly humanity's strongest trade deal. Now millions of people spend hours online searching for identity, purpose, and belonging, while algorithms quietly transform everyone into anxious little tribes fighting over headlines they barely finished reading. The problem is not that humans stopped believing in something. Humans always believe in something. Political movements, celebrity culture, nationalism, online ideologies, conspiracy theories. The human brain naturally builds meaning systems whether religion exists or not. That is why the real question is not whether religion is completely useless. Clearly it is not. The deeper question is whether humans can preserve the good parts religion provided, like community, morality, purpose, and emotional resilience, without abandoning critical thinking in the process. And modern society still does not have a fully convincing answer to that question. What goodness looks like without fear? This is where the conversation becomes surprisingly beautiful. A person who chooses kindness without fear of punishment may actually be demonstrating a deeper form of morality than most people realize, because their compassion is not forced. It is chosen deliberately. They help others because suffering feels real to them, because empathy matters to them, because they understand pain, loneliness, grief, and vulnerability through their own human experience. Not because they believe some cosmic authority is tracking moral behavior, like an exhausted accountant managing eternal spreadsheets. And interestingly, many religious people already behave this way too, even if they never think about it directly. Most parents do not love their children because Scripture commands them to. They love instinctively. Most people do not comfort grieving friends because they calculated possible heavenly rewards beforehand. Nobody shows up to a funeral thinking, excellent opportunity for bonus salvation points. They show up because empathy is deeply human. Religion can absolutely strengthen those instincts. Sometimes it inspires extraordinary compassion, sacrifice, and generosity. Throughout history, religious communities built hospitals, cared for the poor, protected vulnerable people, and created strong support systems during times of suffering. But religion did not invent empathy itself, and once you recognize that distinction, the entire argument changes shape. Suddenly, morality stops being a battle between believers and non-believers. It becomes a much deeper human question instead. How do imperfect creatures reduce suffering while constantly struggling with ego, fear, tribalism, selfishness, and power? That problem belongs to everyone regardless of religion. Because humans are complicated. We are capable of incredible kindness and shocking cruelty often within the same lifetime, sometimes within the same afternoon if customer service calls are involved. That is why goodness cannot simply be measured by belief alone. Beliefs are easy to announce publicly. Character reveals itself somewhere much quieter. It appears in moments where power could be abused but is not. In moments where honesty costs something. In moments where kindness happens without applause, reward, or recognition. That is where morality becomes real. Not in slogans, not in rituals, not in public performance designed to look righteous in front of others, but in ordinary moments when nobody is watching and cruelty would actually be easier. That is where character reveals itself most honestly. So, can you be good without religion? History says yes, psychology says yes, human behavior says yes, but that doesn't mean religion is meaningless. It means morality is larger than any single system claiming ownership over it. And maybe that realization is uncomfortable because it places responsibility back onto us. No shortcuts, no guaranteed certainty, no outsourced conscience. Just human beings trying, often imperfectly, to become less cruel than our instincts sometimes allow. Maybe that's harder than simply obeying rules. But maybe it's also more honest. Because in the end, the real test of morality isn't whether someone believes in God. It's how they treat people who can do absolutely nothing for them.